Welcome, everyone. How are y'all doing? You look fabulous. It's great to see you. Um, we're really excited about this forum as we come back 6 months after the shutdown for another sort of discussion around our response and our plans in the wake of COVID-19. We have 106 people registered for this forum, and we only have a capacity of 100, so you guys are all really lucky that you got in. So congratulations. We also have people from 26 different states represented, so New England plus a bunch of others. So welcome to all of you from elsewhere in the country as well. And for those of you from areas suffering from fires and floods, as well as the pandemic, we're certainly thinking of all of you and what you're going through. We're sure that all of your Zoom skills have improved 1,000% over the last 6 months. So it's almost needless to say that there's things like mute buttons and stop and start video. We would like you to put your name and organization, state you're from in the chat, as well as your favorite fall harvest treat or activity. So share who you are in the chat, and also feel free to amend your name with your organization preferred pronouns as well. Today we are, as I mentioned, coming back from, a lot of you are in the process of coming back to schools or in your families, in your job, colleges and other schools. And it's the fall season. It's 6 months since the pandemic really hit us hard. And we wanted to take this opportunity to sort of come back together, to hear about challenges and opportunities, some of which are unexpected, and to think about next steps that we can do together, we can take together to transform the food system. The structure we have today, we're really excited about. We have 7 people who will be giving some really short briefs from their perspectives in the food system, and we're dividing it up into 3 segments that'll be followed by some short breakouts with very small groups of us, opportunity to sort of talk about our experiences and issues that we are seeing out there related to the topics, which will be, the first set will be focusing on our producers, both seafood and farmers and farm workers. So we have 2 great presentations there. And the second set will be focused on schools, community, and policy implications. And we have 3 presenters who will introduce to talk about those issues. And then we'll wrap up with a session on sort of how we're leveraging existing relationships in infrastructure with presentations from college and food hubs. So we're sort of covering the gamut, and obviously just small bits of information, brief stories to sort of spark the conversations in our smaller groups. And at the conclusion, we'll have an opportunity to come back together and talk about any sort of next steps that emerge out of the conversations. And we're encouraging people to use the chat box liberally to not only share your personal identification information, but also your thoughts, links, ideas, opportunities for us to be working on together. Greatly appreciating the whole FINE team for the role they're playing and helping to plan and make this work, and really excited for the presenters who all have a ton to share and have agreed to use their best discipline to keep their remarks brief enough so that we can get the gist of their story, their information they want to share, and also leave opportunities for all of you to talk with each other. So we'll see how this goes. And if anyone on the FINE team needs to chime in, if I've forgotten anything, please feel free to do so. But with that, I would like to introduce the first session, which is going to be focusing on some of the producers in the region. And our two presenters are Kyle Foley, who's the Senior Program Manager for the Gulf of Maine Research Institute up in Portland. And she's going to be talking a little about the impacts on the fishermen, the seafood markets, and a call to action for institutions. And she'll be followed by Rose Bookbinder, who's the co-director and lead organizer for the Pioneer Valley Workers Center, who'll be talking about some of the perspectives of farm workers and some of the unexpected opportunities that may be emerging for us in the region. So right now, I'd love to turn it over to you, Kyle, to tell us a little bit about what's going on in your neck of the ocean.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's great.
Great. Yeah, well, thank you guys for asking me to talk a little bit today and raising up what is going on with the fishing and the seafood industry. And I work for the Gulf of Maine Research Institute, which is based in Portland, Maine, and I manage our seafood programs. So we do a lot of work with the whole seafood supply chain, trying to get more regional seafood out into the marketplace. And our organization also does a lot of work with fishermen and with local aquaculturists or shellfish farmers as well. So what people may or may not know is that the seafood industry in the US across the whole country is really reliant on restaurant and food service for sales. So about 70%, and that's 70, of seafood that's eaten in the US is eaten outside the home at restaurants or in some kind of food service operation. So that has been, as you can imagine, a really huge hit for this industry over the past 6 months. And even with all the increase in people shopping at retail to cook at home, the retail and grocery sales have still not made up for all of the losses that the seafood industry is facing both here in New England and also around the country. So what that means is that there's less demand, prices have been lower because of that, and fishermen have been scaling back their effort to fish in different ways. So some people didn't go fishing or limiting their trips because of the lack of demand and the really low prices. It's not always worth it for them to take a trip if the price is particularly low. We're also seeing some people adapt by fishing with fewer crew or with no crew if they're a small boat. And that definitely brings up some safety concerns because fishing is already a dangerous job. And when you are constraining how many people are working on the boat, that's not always a great situation. And then we're also seeing people expand the fisheries that they're involved in. So people are trying to diversify. Somebody who fishes for ground fish might be trying to expand into fishing for something like pogies, which is typically a bait fish. I think what we're seeing is that some of those might be longer term changes that fishermen are making to try to diversify the sources of income that they have and the variety of fisheries that they're able to pull from. Some people have also pivoted to direct to consumer sales in a variety of ways. There's people doing really informal, using public Facebook groups to connect with people right in their own towns or communities. And then there's a smaller number of folks who have gotten more robust online platforms going and maybe are considering a longer term shift to having direct to consumer sales be a part of their income. But for a lot of people, the direct to consumer sales are really a Band-Aid. And we've also been hearing from people that over the summer, the initial excitement from people in getting local fish and finding local seafood from fishermen in their communities has plateaued a bit and in some cases has dropped off a bit. So we're not sure how much that's helping people to make up for all of the losses that they have faced. And then one other thing I thought I would highlight is that fishermen in New England in particular will hopefully be seeing some federal relief soon, although it's not going to nearly make up for the losses that most of them have incurred. So the CARES Act that was passed back in April allocated $300 million to the seafood industry across the whole country. And just to give you a comparison, I think USDA and the agricultural sector got about $19 billion. So $300 million for the entire fishing and seafood industry is not a whole lot and goes really fast. And it took time over the past few months for the federal government to allocate that to the states, and now for the states to figure out how they're going to distribute those funds. So I know that Maine and Massachusetts have just recently had their plans approved, and fishermen haven't seen those dollars yet, but we'll hopefully be seeing them soon this fall. And I think apart from those updates, one of the things that we're thinking a lot about looking forward and over the past couple of months, and that a lot of organizations working with the seafood industry are focused on right now, is getting home cooks excited about seafood, because obviously it's not great to have this intense reliance on restaurants and food service. And we'd love to see a longer term shift to a better balance where people are cooking seafood more at home. We've definitely seen some great excitement over the past few months, and people experimenting, cooking shellfish at home for the first time and trying new things. But I would say for me, the call to action to folks on this call in the institutional space is, I know, first of all, that seafood can be a daunting thing to do in a to-go or takeaway situation, which I know is what a lot of institutions are facing this year. But if you're interested in talking with me or with Tanya, we've both been discussing ideas, and trying to think of creative ways to ensure that we don't lose the great momentum that has been in place for the past several years in terms of institutions serving seafood. So every little bit counts. And if you are able to serve seafood at all, it definitely is helping the local industry if you're able to prioritize local and be flexible about what you're sourcing. So I'm happy to talk with anybody about creative ideas you have, or if you'd like to brainstorm about how to serve seafood given all of the challenges going on right now. But we appreciate anything that anybody can do or is doing around seafood these days. It all helps. So I think I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Kyle. That's great. Really appreciate your remarks, and invite folks to put questions or comments or ideas in the chat. We'll also have an opportunity to talk about this in our small groups, and it's certainly one of the issues that FINE as an organization is interested in helping to support the network in terms of thinking about how to optimize the institutional markets for seafood. Huge opportunity. So that was great. Thank you. We do now is introduce Rose Bookbinder, who is the co-director and lead organizer at the Pioneer Valley Workers Center. Rose also has a role nationally on the board of the Food Chain Workers Alliance, who we sort of first connected with back when Jose Olivia from the Alliance spoke at our summit back in 2019. And Rose is down in Northampton, Mass, I believe. And is going to talk a little bit about the farm workers who they work with and have been surveying, as well as some other issues that have been coming up for them recently. So Rose, welcome.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to first just start off by acknowledging many of us are probably balancing a crazy start to a school year, whether you're parents of kids or you have family members that work in schools, and just kind of the traumas that we're all experiencing in this moment due to that. I'm especially bringing it up because I just ran back upstairs after my kids yelling to me that one of our chickens was dying. And so had hoped to feel a little bit less out of breath to start off this meeting, but I think we're all probably experiencing different elements of this right now in this pandemic. And it's unfortunate that I feel like a lot of our world and country are not prioritizing the slowdown that we all need to accommodate this pandemic and traumatic experience that so many of us are experiencing at different levels. But I just wanted to bring you into my world for a moment where I'm at, so that we can come at this presentation from the same place. So yeah, I thank you so much for having me, and it's great to be here with all of you, and some of you I've collaborated with in the past, and I'm looking forward to ways that we might be able to continue to do that in this changing environment. That's really, I think, bringing together a lot of unlikely partners in new situations, because folks are facing issues that they haven't in the past, and some of us have been facing for generations. As Peter mentioned, I'm one of the co-directors at the Pioneer Valley Worker Center. Our work spans from across the Connecticut River Valley, from Springfield up to the Vermont border. And I have like a very short little PowerPoint that I made. I'm just gonna, I think I have, yeah, okay, I have the ability to do that. Sort of what I wanted to talk about with all of you is the how important that we at the Worker Center believe that food and farm workers, are really central to food justice. And one of our, really grounding philosophies is that nothing about us without us is for us, and recognizing that 22 million workers in the food system make up the largest employment sector in the United States, with over 1 out of every 7 workers in the U.S. working along the food chain. Our work is really rooted in our worker committees. The bulk of them are in Springfield. They are food worker members, predominantly farm workers who travel either to Connecticut or further up the River Valley north to work on farms. They work bi-monthly to strategize around campaigns and ongoing work, and they identify solutions to collective problems. And I come at this work, I was a restaurant worker for 10 years, and so have really seen the different treatments of workers in our food system, recognizing I'm a white woman, and I was able to quickly move from being a dishwasher and busser to front of the house, where I was able to make much more money in tips than my immigrant coworkers who worked in the back of the house and didn't have those opportunities. And so I really come at that work with recognizing the privilege that I have, and also the experience that I've had as a low-wage worker for many years. Just a couple images of our members, and the pivot that we've done in this moment during COVID, which is sort of what Peter and I were talking about, and thinking about the opportunities that we have right now to really value those that are on the front lines of this work, and who are the partners that we can collaborate with to be reinvesting in our local food systems and prioritizing that, and also making sure that not only are we prioritizing that the food be local and organic, but that it's we're creating sustainable jobs, and we're creating food access, and that we're centering voices of Black and brown and low wage and immigrant workers as we're developing what we're building, and learning from them as folks who are on the front lines of this work. And this is just a little image that we sent out recently about the ways that we've pivoted, which is distributing, thousands and thousands of face masks and gloves and shields to meet the places where our state has really failed to provide that. And we partnered with both, farm owners and suppliers, but also with, community organizations on the ground to make sure that, folks that were headed back to work were not being put into vulnerable situations and potentially, contracting COVID and dying for a low wage job, that was not even putting enough food on the table to begin with for them. And these are just some facts about workers in the food system, which I'm sure many of you do know, but I think it's really important for us to think about. The food chain pays the lowest hourly medium wage to frontline workers compared to all other industries. The annual medium wage is $16,000, and the hourly medium wage is $10. And it goes on to just talk about significant racial and gender wage gaps. Injury and illness with food workers is very high. and 21% of the workers in our food industry are immigrant workers. And I think that, you know, we recognize that food is devalued, and so this gets pushed down onto employers who then, you know, are having to work with a little to pay workers. But we think that there's opportunity here to think together about how we're leveraging institutions and local buying to help raise standards, because, you know, it's not helping anyone if the food workers themselves, who make up the largest sector, can't afford the food that they're growing or selling or serving. And we've also pivoted in this moment to provide 4 weekly food distributions. We've also, I think I might have seen some folks on here, I'm not sure, from Guarding the Community, which is in Springfield. I thought I did, but I'm not sure. Who, you know, we've also partnered with to get fresh food out from their gardens to community members. We've quadrupled, actually even more than quadrupled. We were just doing food distributions in the winter for farm workers who were out of work, but now are doing them 4 times weekly, serving around 400 to 500 people. And we've been sourcing that food from local farms, who predominantly organic farms, that are donating it. We've also been purchasing, we helped to incubate a worker-run immigrant farm that we've been using donations to purchase goods from their farm to distribute for free at our food distributions as well. I'm just gonna skip that. And just sort of skip also, I know that Peter, you wanted me to kind of share some of the facts of what we've been learning. We are engaged in a research survey with UMass Amherst Labor Center and also the history department to get a better idea of what conditions are like on the ground for Massachusetts farm workers, predominantly focused on those workers that, you know, aren't usually as visible. So, you know, some Jamaican H-2A workers, mostly Central American immigrant workers. This is sort of some old facts that I had hoped to update for you, but then we had the chicken dying issue. So this is a little bit dated, but you know, the things that we've been finding are just, I wish that they weren't shocking, but, you know, they are still prevalent in our agricultural sector, which is, you know, folks saying that 53% of them did not receive access to protective gear, gloves, masks for working with chemicals from their farms. 48% reported not consistently having access to bathroom. 37% say they do not have access to regular clean water, and some getting reprimanded for pausing to drink water in the fields. 70% of immigrant workers said they are required to work longer hours, do heavier lifting than their white US-born peers, which was confirmed by white farm workers as well. And just some more additional facts that you can look at there. But, you know, I think we have a lot of work to do to make our food system stronger and more resilient. And the things that, you know, when Peter and I were talking, was just how critical it is in this moment to think about how we're collaborating, because I think for the first time, many folks who have had access to more resources and more privileges are seeing the effects of this pandemic, and are maybe more willing to think creatively together. And I think that was sort of one of the things that I just wanted to stress in this moment, is that for folks who are for the first time seeing the lack of a safety net, there's many in our communities who have been very aware of that for a long time, and that they have resources and knowledge to share as we're thinking about how to make these shifts. And you know, one thing I have heard in the food justice movement is, you know, oh, we should try out this new thing like regenerative food, or like these sort of models, but it's like models that have actually exist for generations in our indigenous communities and in other communities that have been facing, you know, in our, you know, Black and brown communities or in the low wage communities, and they've been creatively thinking of solutions. And I guess today I'm just urging us to think about how we reach out to those communities, how we build trust with them, how we turn to organizations that do have that trust and listen and you know, take time to make the shifts that we all are excited about that might be coming, centering again those who have most been impacted by the injustices that our food system has put, whether it's, stealing people from land and, our history of slavery and all of these things that are very deeply rooted in our history here in the United States, and recognizing that as we make these hopefully positive shifts.
Thanks, Rose. Really appreciate that perspective and the data that's behind it and the resources that we can all look to. So thanks both Kyle and Rose. And what I want to do right now, just moving us along, is Sarah's going to send us all off into smaller groups to have a short conversation with each other. The prompts are going to be pasted in the chat as well. So what's next as markets shift in the coming months? How are producers going to adapt? What does it mean for farm workers? And what are you hearing on the ground? And how are you or others supporting the producers from your perspectives? So if folks in the room, there'll be about 6 of you in each room, can just kind of quickly introduce yourselves and then talk about some of these questions. We'll be asking you when you come back just to type in the chat to the full group things that have come up that you wanted to share more broadly, and we'll see how that goes. So enjoy your breakouts, and we'll see you in a little bit. Balancing the desire for hearing from our presenters and talking amongst ourselves. So we'll learning as we're going. I know a lot of you had a chance to share some, but we're encouraging folks to put things in the chat to keep the conversation going that way as well. Either comments on what you heard, or if you didn't have an opportunity to speak and you want to share it out, because then we'll make that available to everyone. So use the chat liberally. Want to now move to our second set of presenters, focusing on schools, community, and policy. And we have 3 great presenters here. Betsy Rosenbluth will start off, who is wears many hats, like many of you. She's a fellow Vermonter and works for the Vermont Farm to School program, but also leads the Northeast Farm to School Collaborative and is based at Shelburne Farms. And is going to be talking a little bit about some school food issues from the regional perspective. And she'll be followed by 2 folks, both from Springfield, Ibrahim Ali and Elizabeth Wills Ogilvie. Ibrahim's from Gardening the Community, he's the executive director there. And Liz is with the Springfield Food Policy Council, as well as wears a variety of other hats. And so we'll introduce them as they go. But Betsy, I'll turn it over to you to start us off.
All right. Thanks, Peter. And I actually was going to talk a little bit about some of the observations I have with school nutrition in Vermont, and some of the things, and food access, and some of the things that we're doing to address it. And then hopefully in our breakout groups, we can talk a little bit more what's happening across the region. In Vermont, like everywhere, food insecurity is increasing by so much. I've heard percentages from 33% to 46% since the start of the pandemic. And another figure that Vermont has lost nearly 50% of its leisure and hospitality jobs. And so hunger is real, and it's there, and it's not going away anytime soon if you look across the year and what that looks like. I think everyone has been aware of, within days of schools shutting down last March, how school nutrition programs mobilized so quickly to be feeding kids, from everything from grab and go, mostly in more of the urban areas, to delivery with school buses and different models for getting food to kids. That model really has relied on some of the waivers coming from USDA. States have been requesting a number of waivers, and I wanted to just emphasize today the waivers that have allowed for universal free meals, right? So all kids 18 and under can receive meals. right now. That got extended again for the fall. Those waivers come in the 11th hour. It's incredibly stressful on staff to not know and be trying to develop a program. It's already stressful given all the variation in schools. Anyway, it did come through at least until the end of December or until the money runs out is what the legislation says. I also want to give a plug. Our Agency of Education in Vermont have been fabulous champions, Rosie Kruger in particular, at advocating for those waivers from USDA and advising schools in supporting them. So it's just been critical to be able to have those meals available without the paperwork, which families aren't comfortable filling out, without the stigma, without separation of who's getting meals or not. It's been available then. A lot of schools are feeding early childhood programs through that. And it's just fundamentally helped families in a huge, huge way. So we are now hoping to extend the waiver again for the rest of the school year. I'm hoping Tanya or Peter can put a link to a petition that's going around nationally to request that USDA extend the waiver that allows universal free meals for kids for the rest of the school year. In Vermont, we've been working towards universal meals so that when this ends, we don't return back to a system that doesn't make any sense, but that as a state, that the state would step up short of the federal government getting there and provide free breakfast and lunch to every kid. So that's what we are working towards. And I hope other states, I know there's interest to at least get rid of the reduced price meals, if not move to universal meals. A couple of other quick things. School nutrition programs really have been shouldering higher costs for all of this. We talked about food prices being higher, materials for PPE, packaging and transportation costs. So we have formed in the state a food security coalition that's been advocating to direct some of the CRF money, the COVID relief funding, to school nutrition programs so that they can purchase equipment, materials, and supplies to continue to do the amazing job that they're doing. Regarding local food, we did try to get CRF money to go towards local purchasing. I don't know if other states, I know New Hampshire was trying as well, if not others, succeeded at that. But we have been successful with the programs that have a system for purchasing local food. They are continuing to buy local food. They've got that in their system. They've got those relationships. We're finding the programs that don't have that system are dropping that local purchasing. And some of that, it's just been hard to find local product that's processed and available for the meal models that people are using right now. And I think we all know that, maybe something we can keep talking about. The last thing I would say is that we're finding with Farm to School that the school nutrition directors we're talking to, that has really helped them weather the disruption. So schools that have had relationships with farmers, when they can't get a product from their distributor, are turning to those farmers. They have that relationship in doing that purchasing. Or the schools that have had strong community ties have been able to engage the community and getting the word out to families or to get help with feeding kids. So, so that kind of resilience we've seen. And in a program in New York, they have what you call the 30% program, but it's an incentive for schools that are purchasing 30%. They get an additional 25 cents a lunch from the state. And whereas we've seen a lot of local purchasing reduced in school meals, in New York, programs are continuing because the incentive is working. It's worth increasing purchasing. The schools we're working with are trying to continue to increase local purchasing even this year so that they can access that reimbursement. So that's my plug for a local purchasing incentive. We're hoping in Vermont there is a bill that would create that. I don't think it's going anywhere this year, but you never know. And there's always next year. But it's good to see that it actually, even in a very disrupted time, has been helping programs and helping farmers. So I might stop there and just, if you have questions, I'm happy to talk about it.
Thanks, Betsy. That's great. And yeah, please do put questions in the chat and we'll get a chance to speak about it as well after. And that theme of creating the relationships and creating the infrastructure to help sustain through the turbulent times, I think is really critical throughout all the sectors and all parts of the system. We're going to turn now to our next two presenters, both of whom are from Springfield, Mass, our fourth largest city in New England, where there's just a ton of different things going on that are very interrelated, from the communities in the schools, with producers, with some of the businesses that are helping to support things. I'm going to start off by asking Ibrahim Ali, who's the executive director of the Gardening the Community, to speak and share a little bit about some of the efforts that took place with a program they've had running for years, but that really changed due to COVID-19 and engaged volunteers and teens in producing food. And then Liz Ogilvie will follow up with some other really exciting related efforts from her work with the Food Policy Council and other roles. So Ibrahim, going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, how's everybody doing? Hope everybody's well. I want to thank you for inviting me to come and talk to folks here, and appreciate the, kind of bringing this conversation into the forefront. Super important that, people who are involved in this food system work get to kind of conversate. So I wanted to clarify a few things about GT, Gardening the Community, in case people are not totally familiar with the work that we do here. We are a youth-based urban farm located in Six Corners, the Six Corners community or neighborhood in Springfield. Predominantly, this community has been kind of populated with people who are African American, as well as Puerto Rican, and kind of a mix of a lot of different ethnicities over the last 10 years or so. So it's definitely like becoming a cornucopia type of community here regarding kind of population. Role has been traditionally, since the organization started, working with the young people of this community and giving them the opportunity to learn about the food system, and then kind of to directly take on the problems that the young people are introduced to by growing food. And over time, we figured out that that might not be enough. And so we've ventured into the realm of farm shares, and we've even taken it the next step further, and that we built a farm store here in the community to better serve and to kind of add, contribute in a way that was just, that for us has been, quite a learning experience. But for the broader community, I feel that we've served the purpose of introducing, I should say reintroducing the idea of organic produce not having to be super expensive and being available in a place that would not be certain.
Ibrahim,
So,
you're going in and
so
out.
our
Maybe
young
you should
people are
turn
not necessarily volunteers. I'm sorry, what happened?
I was going to say, maybe since you're outside at the farm store, maybe you should turn your video off because you're breaking up a lot.
Okay, hold on. Let me see what I can do here. I think I need to get closer to the Wi-Fi too. Sorry about that, people. Technical difficulties, all right? Okay, so you let me know, give me the hands up or just a signal if it seems to get a little bit better, okay?
It's getting better.
Okay, cool. So what I was saying was that, our young people serve that purpose of being, kind of advocates for their families and themselves, and, getting out into the world and seeing what the issues regarding food in this neighborhood are: distribution, access, lack of stores serving organic produce. Obviously, we have stores in the neighborhood. We do have places to eat food. But for those individuals who might want to have a different type of diet, or their health necessitates a different type of diet, our existence is critical for them being able to do that. Now, how volunteers have played a role, particularly in this time with living under right now, around March, when things really began to indicate that we were going to be, definitely have to have some changes in our society. Our young people did what other people did, and they stayed home. Most of my staff, we made it the collective decision to keep the store open. We thought it was important that, to be able to do that, to keep the store open. So the problems that were presented as a result of, kind of making that decision were that, yes, the store would be open, but then we needed to figure out, where the actual work was going to come from, like who was going to actually do the things that were needed, like on the site, in early spring and what have you, when we didn't have any idea when we would get any volunteers, and we didn't know when or if the young people would be safe enough to come back on the site. And so, the volunteer call that we put out there into the world was one in which, this is our situation. If anyone, wants to try to assist us, it would be great. We would truly, truly appreciate it. And we left it at that, and we just, began to start to do the work that was needed. And I could say that, we didn't get like a super overwhelming response, because people had, the concerns that we also shared. But we did get a small contingent of people that did come. And so in this sense, kind of referring to that situation, that is what allowed us to really proceed kind of effectively with our year, growing wise and farming wise, due to that work of that small contingent of people that helped kind of make that, facilitate that transition. Our normal kind of volunteer situation here is that we'll get between 300 and 500 volunteers over the course of a season, mostly because, we have a lot of schools that are doing their volunteer hours. High schools would want to do visits. And so, that there's really no substitute for that amount over the course of a season, that amount of people coming in to contribute. And so, although we, have been able to do a lot of work, and, things are definitely growing. I mean, I can show you some of the, what it looks like right now. It's just, there's a good amount of produce that we grow here, but it wasn't as robust as it could have been, only because we just didn't have the people. And that's really been, kind of the biggest loss that we've experienced, just in terms of volunteers. Now, my personal belief and understanding right now is that we're never going to go back to what things were before this situation occurred, only because the economic impact that we've undergone so far is so far gone that there's just no way we can go back to what was. I think one of the things that I've heard the previous person mention was that despite that, there's a whole opportunity that's being presented to redefine what it was and what we had previously, so that we can begin to build something brand new, with new ideas, fresh ideas. And that's where I see the most encouragement and the most hope, is that in that, you know, that we as a state, as a city, as a country will kind of look forward to rebuilding what and trying something new. I think that'd be crucial.
That's great, Ibrahim. I really appreciate you sharing that perspective from the ground in the greenhouse there.
Yeah.
It does look like there's a lot going on there. Really sort of continuing from Ibrahim's remarks in talking with Liz O'Gilvy earlier and realizing the connection between their organizations and a broader set of issues in the Springfield area and around. I thought it'd be great to have Liz also share some of the work that she and her group have been doing and some of those connections. So Liz, let me just turn it over to you.
Hi, Peter, thank you. And I'm thrilled to see people that I know here. I'll try to talk fast because I always have far too much to say. Full disclaimer, every time I talk, it's an infomercial for GTC because I am the board chair, and Ibrahim and I have grown up in the food system here in Springfield together. And so GTC was my doorway in. I literally lived a couple hundred yards away from where Ibrahim is standing. Where the GTC lot was just a smut hole. I couldn't describe it any other way. And my husband and I are both from Springfield, but we moved here right after President Obama was elected because I tricked him into thinking if someone that I knew could become the president, we could go home and I could fix Springfield. I was younger and naive, but no less convinced that I can fix Springfield. And I'm not going to speak for Ibrahim, but it's important to acknowledge, I appreciate that Rose acknowledged the context of remote school. I'm experiencing that. So should you see a look of alarm on my face, don't be alarmed. It'll just mean something is happening with my sixth grader. But we are also in a moment of pretty intense crisis across the country. And it would be silly to not, just note that. Generally, when I speak, I learned an amazing lesson from my dear, dear friend and colleague, Kathy Wicks, who you're going to hear from, that we often need to remind ourselves to breathe. So I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath because I'm going to talk about race in the context of my work, and that can make us get like this. And we need to learn to get comfortable with the discomfort that comes with talking about race. So my work is completely informed by my understanding as a member of the BIPOC community. And I realize we started using that language and lots of people don't know that it stands for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And we, Black and Indigenous folks, particularly those of us working in the Northeast Farmers of Color network here, the reason we pulled Black and Indigenous out is because our experience is quite different from other people of color. It's longer and is the reason this country has the infrastructure it has. And now I recognize it's being held up by farmers who farm on other people's land. I don't use farm worker language because most of the people I know who are working on farms could farm that land and out-farm the people they work for if they had access to land and if things were racially equitable. So knowing that I am the descendant of a kidnapped person standing on stolen land, my work is vitally personal to me. And in Springfield, my family's been here 100 years. So noting that this is the 400th year of the landing of the Mayflower, I'm telling you all of this because I hope that you will begin to internalize it in your work, wherever that is. So even if you're working in fisheries and you're working with predominantly people of European descent, understand that people of color do not have access to fish. It has not gotten less expensive. It's gotten even more expensive, even though I can drive to a boat in an hour and a half. So coming through GTC, I learned about the food system, and I learned that we weren't in it except as workers. We were not able to inform our own decision. Springfield is majority people of color, 85 to 90%, with members of the Latinx community being the largest group if they organized themselves and thought of themselves as one people. But obviously, like Black folks, they're not a monolith, so there are many ethnic groups, including people of Dominican descent, Guatemalans. We have a lot of people here who work on farms in the Valley and are completely left out of that work. But I got involved first with school gardens in the Food Policy Council, mostly because I wanted to create a feeder system for GTC. I thought if we could get, I didn't know anything about school gardens, but I thought if we were teaching kids about growing food from elementary school, and by the time they got to GTC, imagine what Ibrahim would be able to accomplish with them, both in terms of not just learning how to grow, but understanding the construct and using it as a way of teaching policy from a popular education perspective. So we do that throughout our work. The Food Policy Council has been instrumental in improving school food because we helped the district write their first USDA grant to get salad bars in every single school, which we did. And we were pushing Sodexo to put school gardens in because their contract was up for renewal. And they thought me a better friend than like the little dog with a bone I had become on their heels, and started going along with everything. So when we jumped into breakfast after the bell, they jumped in with us because they understood as participation rates went up, they would make a lot more money. And our participation rates were somewhere between 80 and 95% at most of our schools. But some of those schools being majority white and people not recognizing that there were hunger issues before we raised breakfast after the bell, which then pushed us to co-lead statewide efforts around that. We wanted legislation because I've been Black a long time and I could see what was coming in our country. And I recognized if we had legislation, it'd be easier to go back and ask for money. And so at the same time that I was learning how to do policy work, I was getting involved at the state level. So I serve on the Mass Farm to School Board and the Mass Food System Collaborative, which wrote our food plan, and Ibrahim was key in making sure that urban agriculture was included in that. Since COVID, our response, well informed by COVID and by the health status of folks here, we are the third largest city in Massachusetts with the worst county health rankings. As noted by Robert Wood Johnson, we have childhood diabetes rates that are higher than some adult onset rates in certain communities. And I'm not talking about the autoimmune kind. I'm talking about the same kind that adults get because of lack of access to food. Where I live, there are 10 McDonald's a mile and 3/4 of my house and still no full service grocery store. And the only farmers markets that we've had, both GTC and the Food Policy Council have participated in them. And now GTC is the only farm store in the city. I may be over time. I am over time. So I'm happy to talk to folks after this, but we support our school district by helping them write their grants. Districts don't know how to tell the story. So if you work with schools, you've got to help them think about USDA grants, both farm to school and other infrastructure grants. We helped our school district get a statewide grant that was available as a part of the COVID response here that was close to $400,000. So they would have no excuse as to why they couldn't continue to package fresh and local foods. And they are buying from 9 different farmers in the valley. And my dream is to aggregate purchasing so the very smallest self-managing schools can get the same price that we get for feeding 30,000 kids. Sorry, I was as fast as I could be. I probably missed a ton of stuff.
It was, Liz, it was great, and Ibrahim and Betsy as well. I mean, I know we're just getting a small few bites of incredible rich stew of action that you're doing in your communities. But it helps to spark the conversation with all of us in breakout rooms. And I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation to hear more and have us continue to make those connections. So thank you all so much for your really important stuff that you're sharing with us.
You're thinking about your work, think about 2 children's books. Charlotte's Web, one of my favorites. I want to be Charlotte and save Wilbur, and Wilbur is my metaphor for the community, and so I'm always trying to send out messages. And Stone Soup, like I say, the Food Policy Council, but it's all I had was a good rock and a good salad, and now people are eating.
2 types.
Well put, and
Thai, the Genovese, cinnamon.
You're doing a lot of magic there, as we talked about the other day.
Cinnamon.
Our prompts for all of you right now are what's happening in your school communities that you want to celebrate or that you want to fix, and what do we need at the state, national level to support the actions that you want to see come in. So we'll take a few minutes with you in small groups. Again, you can quickly introduce yourself, and then if you can get to those questions that'll be in the chat, we'll do that, and then we'll come on back and wrap up with our third session. So thanks again, Betsy, Ibrahim, and Liz. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. Appreciating the discussions and the presentations, and feel free to also offer suggestions on format and your feedback in the chat. We take it really seriously as we continue to improve and try and plan for success. We realize that we may not have time for breakouts after the next two presentations, but we'll have a chance for people to talk in the bigger group. So what I'd love to do now is, again, ask you to use the chat for any inspiring comments that came in the discussions there or questions. We'll be sharing that with everyone afterward. What I'd like to do now is to introduce our last set of speakers, Nikki Ayers, who's a sales manager at Farm Fresh Rhode Island down in Rhode Island, and Kathy Wicks, who's a sustainability director at UMass Amherst dining operations. Both talking about sort of their experiences leveraging their existing resources due to the disruptions and repurposing them for other ends. So Nikki, I'd like you to start off to talk a little about some of the work that's been going down at Farm Fresh.
Hi all, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I'm just going to share my screen and do a quick little presentation. Let's see here. Okay, so I work for Farm Fresh Rhode Island. We're a nonprofit food hub, and we have a couple different facets that we do. One of them is our wholesale distribution model. And I'm just going to talk about why access matters to both consumers and farmers and what infrastructure and relationships we leveraged. The direct-to-consumer pivot happened quickly after we realized that we were looking at a world in which we would only have about 10 wholesale accounts, as opposed to the 150 to 200 that we were servicing weekly. This wouldn't just impact us, but obviously farmers as well. They're facing a huge monetary loss, also the impact on food waste, and just thinking about the imminent impact on our organization too and our employees. The financial impact of us basically shutting down and laying off staff was a real concern. And at the same time that all of this was happening, we saw an outcry from the community of bare grocery shelves and food shortages, as well as the issue of access. What if you can't get to the grocery store? What if you're a SNAP user? At the time, Amazon was the only one delivering SNAP to SNAP users, and their wait list was 3 weeks long. So the decision to open our site up to home delivery was directly influenced by our community of farmers and producers and our tiny state of Rhode Island that has always been so supportive of us by donating, attending farmers market. It was really a natural way to say thank you for being there for us, and now we can be there for you by providing access. And how did we make such a large change so quickly to our organization? We were lucky to have a really robust email list from years of newsletter signups at the farmers market. And we got out word to about 40,000 people in the matter of a couple of days. We all know that the local food system is nimble. We made this announcement on a Thursday that we were going to pivot to home delivery, and we had our first home delivery by Tuesday. So we also were able to be in touch with community partners that helped us champion the access issue that we were facing as well. For SNAP users, we were able to quickly obtain a mobile FNS number from DHS. And we were also quickly added to the 211 list of resources. So really quickly able to become a partner for food access. And the last thing is age-old wisdom of don't fix it if it's not broken. Our platform was already really set up to do this, albeit in not the most necessarily consumer-friendly way, but sticking to what we know and not reinventing something that works just fine was really key to handling doing twice as much, 3 times as much business in basically overnight. It was also really important for farmers to, at the time, they were all switching to online delivery. I had some farmers that told me that they were listing on 20 different sites. So for us, not changing things, I think really helped everybody deal with the volume. My next slide. So the infrastructure that we leveraged, we were really lucky. I've watched food hubs and farmers alliances start from basically scratch since March. We're already a food hub. So we already have the drivers, the trucks, the cold storage and ordering platform. So we leveraged that and just used it to its full extent, which was really exciting. The other piece of infrastructure that we leveraged that was really our farmers market team was our bonus bucks program, which keeps the prices as low as possible for SNAP customers. Bonus bucks increases the spending power of shoppers using supplemental SNAP, supplemental nutrition assistance program, benefits at the farmers market and now at Market Mobile by providing a 100% match on grocery purchases to spend for fresh fruits and vegetables. That's double the SNAP dollars to spend. So leveraging that really made it so that we could have the biggest impact possible for SNAP users. We also piloted hosting some pickup sites too. We hosted one at a domestic violence resource center, and that went over really well. There were 13 customers and more than $1,000 in sales for local foods. And we leveraged both infrastructures and relationships of a lot of our customers. A lot of restaurants that we worked with had to pivot as well. And sometimes that pivot included, you know, we have an upscale restaurant in Boston that started doing a CSA box and using all of our produce that they were buying from Farm Fresh for that box. So really using existing partners who had big ideas like that we might not necessarily be able to host every single pickup site, but being able to talk to customers that this is something that can work and it can actually keep your business afloat. If you're a restaurant and you're falling on those hard times, it definitely worked out really well. So that was something that we saw a lot of success with. And the relationships that we leveraged, farmer and producer relationships were huge. We leveraged them in so many different ways. One of the ones that really stuck out to me was when we first opened up the platform for home delivery, one of our meat producers ended up selling $7,000 of meat. Her usual order was about $300. So getting it here, she has a small pickup truck, was gonna be nearly impossible. We reached out to a dairy farm by her with a reefer box truck and they were able to go pick it up and bring it back down. You know, it wasn't anything that anybody charged anything for. It's just this sense of being together and we're all in this and how can we help each other? So that was huge. We've seen farmers share equipment, help each other pack orders, you know, people sharing trucks to be able to bring orders to us. And I think that that has just helped out so much overall. We've also been working with other food hubs too, which historically has been kind of tough because in the Northeast area, we all kind of have similar products and we all kind of have our own areas that we work with, that we're kind of set with. But when things started to kind of fall apart, we could be there for each other to keep our supply chains up. So that was really great as well. And also the opportunity to connect on operational ideas. We're all in the same boat of being thrown into this craziness, you know, how can we help each other? And then also with our restaurants and institutions, we were able to hire some workers from restaurants that had been laid off that were our customers. We had some folks from institutions that were coming to volunteer and pack boxes. So that was huge too. And then some numbers. That's a quick download of why we pivoted. So I just wanted to share some real-time numbers so that you can see the impact of direct to consumer, as well as how SNAP recipients have helped farmers too. We've done 391 SNAP deliveries, about $56,000, and the bonus bucks dollars utilized, that's 22,000. So we basically saved the consumer half of their order. And then total towns served for SNAP, we've served 12 towns with almost 75% of those transactions happening in Pawtucket, which is where we're located, which was really nice to see. We also participated in the USDA program, the Farmers to Family Food Boxes. which I'm sure most of you know about. It was in conjunction with the Rhode Island Community Food Bank. We packed 13,000 orders. It was 4.8 million pounds of food and approximately $600,000 of sales to local farms. So that was, it made a huge impact. And then total dollars moved on behalf of farmers since mid-March has been 2.8 million. Total dollars year to date, about 3 million. And just to give you an idea of how that compares to last year in total, we did 2.4 million. So we're on track to do almost double, which has been amazing to be a part of. It's definitely been busy. We're all tired, but it's been amazing to be a part of, and we have a lot of happy farmers. And then I just wanted to share some of the institutional work that we're currently, that's currently being done, and a little bit of a look ahead. We work with this company called Tree Bark. They're actually another nonprofit. All their profits go back into their community yoga program. And they started making school breakfast kits. They were a granola company, and they kind of figured out that they could do the, they could have all of the items that were approved for the USDA school breakfast programs. So because we're an approved vendor with Sodexo and Chartwells, we were able to distribute on behalf of them really quickly. And so far we've served 86,000 meals to schools since April. So that's been huge. That's been one of the biggest successes that we've seen, is being involved in that school breakfast program. We're still working with the hospitals all through COVID. We, and now we were able to distribute to at least 3 or 4 of our local hospitals that are Sodexo accounts. So that's been great. And then colleges are coming back online. They're starting to order about half as much as last year, but I expect to still keep up with those relationships because they're super important. And that's pretty much where we are right now.
Thanks so much, Nikki. That's great. And I know we're getting close to the end of our time, so I'm going to let Kathy join us now to wrap us up with some comments about what's happening down at UMass and some of your perspectives. Thanks again, Nikki. That was great.
I promised myself I wasn't going to do that, but I spoke while muted. Thank you for inviting me to speak, and I just want to amplify something that Liz said in terms of taking a deep breath, but also taking an opportunity to lean in. We're all up like this and back like this and distant, and there are things that are being said a lot that need to be addressed, and we should all be leaning into those conversations and feeling those edges of uncomfortableness and getting used to them and befriending them. So I will just talk a little bit and as quickly as possible about some of the things that we've been doing. And I would say that a lot of what we have been doing since March has been crisis management. We are about at 10% capacity of what we were at a year ago at this time. So serving about 1,000 meals a day compared to 50,000 meals a day. And figuring out both in terms of planning, but also participating, and also serving the community in terms of both our community of employees and students and the larger community. So some of the things that we've been doing is making donations. So first, in terms of some of the inventory that we had an excess of that had that it was clear wasn't going to be able to be served to students because they weren't on campus. And so we were able to distribute those out to the larger communities. I think that we distributed 800 cases of eggs at one point, so things like that. We've also been able to make larger donations along with our partners at the student farm through our permaculture program. A lot of what would have gone into the meal program, and a small portion would have been donated. We've been really able to amplify the amount of produce that's going directly to the Survival Center and to soup kitchens. And then we really have been trying to be more community faced. So we used our communication streams and our web presence to get information out to staff, faculty, students that were still in the area about what food resources were available, whether it was to those nimble aggregators that were doing home delivery, or whether it was food access sites for folks that may be experiencing food access issues for the first time, and really trying to make sure that people knew where to get access to food, but also access to local. And then we also did a lot of virtual engagement. So we did, again, trying to connect with people where they were. So we were doing a lot of engagement virtually, both to talk to folks about how they could be growing their own food, and again, how they could be getting local food easily, safely, and affordably. And then we also, around food security, have been participating in the USDA school feeding program for the last couple of years. We were able to get right up off the ground in at end of March, beginning of April, to get food to kids and families in the Amherst area. And then we've also been working around student support. So knowing what students were still in the area, what their needs were, how we could participate, whether it was in boxes or availability to just come into the dining commons for free if you didn't have, if you had run out of meal swipes. And then also thinking more broadly with the basic needs coordinator on campus, a number of other community-based organizations, and really participating in those community conversations on how can we stay connected. We did a lot of cooking videos and trying to get people excited about local produce and excited about doing their own cooking, to make that an easy thing to do. For those of you who know me, that there were many times when I had to access food security systems, and oftentimes didn't have the ability or the resources to cook that butternut squash that was so beautifully grown in the area, but I didn't have the resources to actually be able to cook it. So making sure that folks are excited and know what to do with what's available in the area. We continue to do those videos. We are partnering with Wicked Fish, and we'll be doing with them in the lead a month-long seafood celebration and online home cooking contest in the month of October. So they will be using social media to get people excited about seafood, local seafood, and then we'll be doing some other online engagements, including a virtual event that some of it will be featured on our menu to our limited number of students that are on the meal plan, but also virtually to whoever else wants to participate. We've also started doing a lot of menu development that happens with what's available locally, and then designing the menu. Since we have such a small group that we're serving, we're able to do that a little differently than what we would have done in the past, where we would have had menus planned well in advance and then gone out to see, you know, to just say, this is what we want, and if it's not available locally, then we'll get it somewhere else. We've really been able to design menus more in time to be able to take advantage of the season. And then we're also doing other collaborations. We're providing some meals for Amherst College. We're providing meals for the Hatfield School District. You know, and those are things that are new, but are rolling along. So we're excited to be doing those as well. And then we've also used our facilities at times for when farmers need those stopgap resources to either move things or store things. And we feel like being able to put those facilities to use in whatever way. So participating in a lot of these conversations, but also using this group and the conversations to really think about what other people have talked about is that things aren't going to look the same ever again. And how can we shift to thinking about communities as all of the resources that exist within the communities, and how can they be coordinated to be activated during times of crisis, and then deactivated when things are, you know, when we have students back. So that's one of the things I hope to be able to have more people think together about, is how can we shift the role of institutions during times of crisis.
That's
Thanks,
great.
everybody.
Yeah, and that's a great wrap up and send off message. I want to thank you and all the presenters and all of you for participating. And as I mentioned at the outset, we'll take the recording and the notes and get it back to folks and make it available. I know we ran over a little bit of time, so I apologize for my role in that. And look forward in the near term for a notice from us about seeking ideas for the Spring Summit, which we will be holding virtually in April, over 3 Thursdays in April, and other opportunities to connect as a network as we go about, as Kathy said, to think differently about how we can keep institutions playing these critical roles as anchors in our communities. So again, thank you all, and we'll be in touch. And please always feel free to be reaching out to us and each other with ideas and needs. And stay safe.